front campaign. The Israeli military has been carrying out a major military operation in and around the West Bank city of Janine since Tuesday. At least 12 Palestinians have been killed and 40 others wounded in this major operation dubbed Iron Wall. In addition to this, more than 3,000 families in the city of Janine have been displaced due to violence, and the water and electricity supplies have been interrupted as well. United Nations has expressed its concerns, saying that what is transpiring in West Bank may have an impact on the fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Though residents of Janine are no stranger to violence, the assault on Janine this time around is particularly intense. Our next report explores.
Israeli military and settler groups have intensified their violence against Palestinians across the occupied West Bank, ever since the Israel-Hamas ceasefire came into effect on Sunday. As if on cue, the settler attacks erupted almost immediately after the ceasefire began, with members of Israel's far right reportedly targeting some of the villages where released Palestinian women and child prisoners had homes. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Israeli settlers have staged at least 1,260 attacks between October 7, 2023, the day of the Hamas-led attack on Israel, and December 31, 2024. Almost working in tandem, the Israeli military launched a raid involving large columns of vehicles backed by helicopters and drones in the Jenin area, which it considers to be a hotbed of Palestinian militancy. Subsequently, the government-run hospital and the nearby Jenin refugee camp were besieged by the Israeli army. According to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the objective of the operation is to eradicate terrorism in the area. Furthermore, he linked the operation to a broader strategy of countering Iran, which supports armed groups across the Middle East, including Hamas in Gaza. Tel Aviv has accused Tehran of attempting to funnel weapons and funds to militants in the occupied West Bank as well. Of the 10 Palestinians killed during Israeli military raids across Jenin Governorate, on Tuesday and 2 on Wednesday night, most were reportedly unarmed.
Our office has verified that at least 12 Palestinians have been killed and 40 injured by Israeli security forces since Tuesday, most of them reportedly unarmed. Among the injured were a doctor and 2 nurses, according to the Palestinian Red Crescent. All killings in a law enforcement context must be thoroughly and independently investigated, and those responsible for unlawful killings must be held to account.
Additionally, over 3,000 families have been reportedly displaced. Essential services, such as water and electricity, have been interrupted for weeks. Not content with these measures, the Israeli security forces have also shut down entrances to major Palestinian cities, such as Hebron, closed checkpoints, and initiated long individual searches of vehicles at those that remained open. Residents of the Jenin refugee camp drew a parallel between their ordeal and what happened in Gaza.
The situation in the Jenin camp is extremely dire. Throughout the night, there has been relentless bombing, shelling and explosions, all while children remain in their homes. We are terrified. They are repeating what they did in Gaza, displacing us while threatening to destroy the camp. They have sent countless messages urging residents to leave. But since yesterday, we have refused to go and are determined to stay.
Reportedly, the residents of the besieged camp received instructions from the Israeli army to leave, either by announcements from drones or military trucks, or through the leaflets dropped in the camp. Though Israeli military has refuted the accusation that it asked residents to evacuate from the area, it has termed its assault on Jenin a right call. Consequently, by Wednesday, hundreds of camp residents began to leave, clutching children, pets and plastic bags full of clothes.
We Palestinians want peace, and if the Israelis truly wanted peace, we would have achieved it by now. How long? It has been 70 years of bloodshed between us and them. Who benefits in the end? Neither they nor us. In the end, we are a people who seek their rights and their dignity. We want to live with dignity and freedom. We are not asking them to give us the moon. We simply want to live in our homeland with dignity and freedom. Nothing more, nothing less.
According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, Israeli troops or settlers have killed at least 850 Palestinians in the West Bank since the Israel-Hamas war began. US President Donald Trump, who has taken credit for finally clinching the Israel-Hamas deal, has lifted sanctions imposed on more than 30 Israeli settler groups and entities by the Biden administration. Add to this the far-right makeup of Israel's government, and what the Palestinians across West Bank have ahead of them is a tough, if not bleak, future.
At least 80 people have been killed in the northeast of Colombia in recent days following a surge in fighting between armed leftist groups, National Liberation Army, and a dissident faction of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, both of whom are vying for territory and control of lucrative cocoa plantations and trafficking routes. The violence, the epicenter of which is in the northeastern Catatumbo region, has forced more than 30,000 people to flee their homes. In a bid to reassert state control amid violence, the Colombian government has declared a state of emergency in the Catatumbo region and deployed some 5,000 troops. The recent bloodshed is reminiscent of a civil war that killed 450,000 people over more than half a century and made the South American country a byword for armed violence. Our next report explores.
A wave of violence has been sweeping across the mountainous northeastern Catatumbo region, a hotspot for cocaine production and trafficking near the border with Venezuela. The region produces 15% of Colombia's coca crop, a detail instrumental in luring the rebel groups to the area. Clashes between the National Liberation Army, or ELN guerrillas, and a dissident wing of the now defunct Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, or FARC, has resulted in deaths of at least 80 people. Reportedly, the surge in violence between the two rival groups has been triggered by the loss of a multi-million-dollar cocaine shipment in November 2024. The rivals had an agreement to not interfere with each other's cocaine production and shipments, but the pact seems to have broken down over the lost cocaine shipment. Both the ELN and the FARC rebel group, which remained active after the main guerrilla group signed a peace agreement in 2016, are heavily involved in the drugs trade. The ELN, believed to have about 6,000 fighters, have also occasionally flirted with peace talks. On 17th of January, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who himself was a member of a left-wing rebel group in his youth, suspended talks with ELN for a second time in less than a year, accusing the group of committing war crimes. People displaced by the guerrilla violence have sought refuge in schools and sports stadiums, which have been converted into impromptu shelters.
The situation is very critical, isn't it? People have left out of fear, especially the children, right? The most important thing in our life, because material things can be regained with work. What truly matters is staying alive and continuing to fight, and hopefully God will allow things to get better as soon as possible.
In addition to the 20,000 people displaced, the United Nations on Tuesday reported about 30 people had been kidnapped and 1,000 others were trapped in their homes by the violence. Interestingly, the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, himself admitted on Tuesday that the state had failed to contain the violence, but it would learn from the failure.
The
situation in Catatumbo shows us where it is going. You also learn from failures, and this is a failure. the failure of the nation. I will try to say it in words that remain hypothetical because we do not have all the information.
In a tentative show of force aimed at convincing skeptical locals that the government is back in charge, special forces were deployed to the town of Tibu in Colombia's northeastern region of Catatumbo.
We have redoubled our capabilities in terms of personnel, technology and resources in order to be able to address the serious situation that is occurring. With the protection of the civilian population and the development of offensive operations to affect the groups at the margins of the law that commit crimes here in the region.
On Wednesday, Colombia's Attorney General's office reissued arrest warrants for 31 leaders of the ELN rebels, who had been participating in peace talks with the government. On the same day, in one of the largest seizures of cocaine in the history of Colombia, 8.2 tons of cocaine was seized by the Colombian authorities from Buenaventura, the busiest port in the country. Reportedly, the drug was found in sacks of mineral fertilizers intended for shipment to Europe. However, in empty settlements around the municipality of Tibu, stickers and graffiti on sheds and shops celebrated late commanders of the once powerful FARC and proclaimed the presence of ELN, providing ample evidence of who is usually in charge. President Gustavo Petro had campaigned on a promise to bring total peace to Colombia. But for 300,000 residents of the Catatumbo region, in the midst of the worst violent crisis Colombia has experienced in the last decade, that promise remains far from fulfilled.
On 21st of January, the Congolese army acknowledged a major breakthrough by the M23 rebels. The armed group fighting government forces has captured the town of Minova, a key supply route for the provincial capital Goma in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. In addition to Minova, the M23 rebels have also captured the mining towns of Lumbishi, Numbi and Shanji in the South Kivu province, as well as the town of Beremana in neighboring North Kivu province. In yet another setback for the Congolese army, the military governor of North Kivu province, Major General Peter Nikuba, died from gunshot wounds sustained while leading troops against the M23 rebels. Since its resurgence at the end of 2021, the M23 movement has continued to gain ground in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The capture of Minova is the latest in a series of significant advances by the M23 in recent weeks, which brings us to the inevitable question: will the city of Goma fall next to the M23 rebels? Our next report explores.
Africa's second largest country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, has been plagued by myriad of armed groups in its east for decades. More than 120 rebel groups have been fighting with national armed forces for power, land, and valuable mineral resources. Preeminent among these is M23, or the March 23 movement, a largely Tutsi rebel group linked with the neighboring Rwanda, though Kigali has repeatedly denied the charge. Fighting spiked in late 2021 when the preeminent M23 rebels, largely dormant for nearly a decade, staged a comeback and captured large swathes of territory in Eastern DR Congo, displacing over 1 million people. In recent weeks, the M23 rebels have made significant advances. Earlier this month, the rebels had captured Masisi, the administrative capital of the Masisi territory in the North Kivu province. And on Tuesday, in a rare acknowledgement, the Congolese army admitted that the rebels had made a breakthrough on Beremana in North Kivu and Minova in South Kivu. A locality of about 65,000 inhabitants, Minova is in the South Kivu province, wedged between Lake Kivu and the Masisi Mountains. The fall of Minova to M23 rebels has further encircled the regional capital Goma, which was captured albeit briefly, by the M23 rebels back in 2012. Reportedly, fighting has been taking place on several fronts around Goma, resulting in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people around the outskirts of the city.
We haven't had peace since the start of this war. Everywhere we go, we find ourselves in an uncertain situation. We don't know what to do. Children get hurt on the way, they go hungry, and we don't know where to go.
If the situation persists, even the tenants of this camp will have to leave for the town of Goma. These people can't accept living here with the M23 nearby. We were comforted by the presence of the displaced people from Nuzulo, but as they have just left, we are probably all going to leave for Goma too.
With luggage on their backs, the displaced people could be seen making their way along the road leading to the center of Goma. But even many routes leading to Goma have now been cut off, forcing people to cross Lake Kivu with supplies on overloaded boats. On these boats, there is rarely a well-established list of passengers, and shipwrecks are rather frequent on the lake. Since the beginning of this year, more than 400,000 people have been displaced by the fighting in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
More and more civilians are being injured, including minors and people who have arrived here with extremely complicated evacuations. Evacuations that have been difficult, evacuations that have been carried out on foot, on stretchers. So injured people have been evacuated in disastrous conditions, on foot, 4 to 5 hours walk to evacuate an injured person.
Since 1998, approximately 6 million people have been killed, while an estimated 7 million have been displaced internally due to the conflict. On the 17th of January, United Nations labeled it one of the world's most alarming humanitarian crises. With the closest fighting now barely 20 kilometers from Goma in the Sake Hills, fears about the fate of the largest city and the capital of North Kivu province are swirling in the air.
Continuing with the continent of Africa, barely 2 weeks after Sudanese armed forces recaptured the strategic city of Wad Madani from the paramilitary rapid support forces, fighting has intensified for the recapture of Sudan's main oil refinery, the Al Jaili oil refinery north of the capital Khartoum. Thick plumes of smoke covering the area around Al Jaili refinery, about 70 kilometers from the capital Khartoum, were reported by eyewitnesses. On Thursday, both the Sudanese army and the paramilitary RSF traded blame over targeting the Al Jaili refinery. The Sudanese army alleged that the RSF purposely set fire to the facility in an attempt to destroy Sudan's infrastructure after failing to seize control of the country's resources and land. On Friday, the Sudanese army claimed to have expelled the paramilitary rapid support forces from the Al Jaili oil refinery. The RSF, which had claimed to be in control of the refinery since the first month of the war in April 2023, has now accused the military of targeting the refinery with barrel bombs during airstrikes. Our next report explores.
The Republic of Sudan, Africa's third largest country by size, has been ravaged by war for more than 21 months now. Tens of thousands have been killed, 12 million people have been forced to flee their homes. And according to the International Rescue Committee charity, the Sudan war has created the biggest humanitarian crisis ever recorded. But how did Sudan plunge into such an enormous conflict? Long simmering tensions between the Sudanese armed forces under the country's de facto leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the paramilitary rapid support forces led by al-Burhan's former deputy Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo had erupted into an all-out war in mid-April 2023. The trigger was the planned integration of the paramilitary RSF into the regular army, an internationally backed political transition plan. In a blitzkrieg, the RSF quickly took over most of the capital Khartoum and rapidly spread into at least half the country. Though the Sudanese military has regained control of some neighborhoods in Omdurman and Bahri in recent months, almost 2 weeks ago, the Sudanese army recaptured Wad Madani, the capital of Al Jazeera state. RSF had controlled Wad Madani, a strategic crossroads south of Khartoum, for more than a year. Following the recapture of Wad Madani, the deputy leader of the Sudanese armed forces had adopted a confident tone, boasting that bigger victories will soon follow.
If we are happy with this victory that took place in Madani, we say that there's still a lot in front of us. This is a big victory that we thank God for, but we are not stopping. We are going swiftly, we are in a hurry, and God willing, soon every inch of this country will be cleansed from the traitors, their terrorist militias, our treacherous Sudanese brothers, and all the countries and organizations that support these traitors. We tell them that Sudan is strong with its people, Sudan is strong with its military.
While the RSF still holds sway over much of Sudan's western region of Darfur and parts of Kordofan in the south, the army has consolidated its grip on the north and east. On Wednesday, following a multi-pronged offensive north of Khartoum, the Sudanese army reached the vicinity of the strategically significant Al Jeli oil refinery. Reportedly, there were direct clashes between the army and the RSF, subsequent to which the Sudanese army seized control of the entrance to the town. The Sudanese army has been bolstered in recent months with fresh armaments and new recruits to allied forces, but the 21-month-long power struggle in Sudan is not exhibiting any sign of ending anytime soon. 3 days prior to the inauguration of a new US administration, the outgoing US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken expressed his regret in not being able to end the war in Sudan.
People are suffering grievously in Sudan. It is, again, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And we have been deeply engaged with our diplomacy to try to bring it to an end. We haven't to date. But as I've said, part of our challenge in any of these situations is to keep working through it, to keep pushing, to keep pressing, to get to that one day of success. It is, for me, yes, another real regret that when it comes to Sudan, we haven't been able on our watch to get to that day of success. As I said, some improvements in getting humanitarian assistance in through our diplomacy, but not an end to the conflict, not an end to the abuses, not an end to the suffering of people.
For peace to prevail in Sudan, both the warring generals must come to the negotiating table and external interference must immediately stop. With the war raging in Sudan, the United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, said on Tuesday that more than 1 million people had fled into neighboring South Sudan. One of the worst humanitarian nightmares in recent history continues to worsen with each passing day in Sudan. Will the world pay attention to the plight of Sudanese, approximately half of whom are in need of all types of humanitarian assistance?
That's all that we could pack in this edition of World at War. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.
This week on the West Asia Post. Amid a truce after 15 months of war, people keep uncovering bodies beneath the ruins in Gaza. And undeterred by the ceasefire, Israel launches a deadly military operation in the West Bank. Also, we tell you all about the mystery behind the size of one of the largest embassies in the world that the US is building in Lebanon. Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, only on WION The World is One.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Minus 12 degrees, 6 feet of snow, 12,000 feet above the sea level. This all does not stop the Indian Army soldiers from patrolling the line of control.
This week on Inside South Asia, the United States of America has a new man in the White House. What does Trump 2.0 mean for South Asia? Are there signs of hope for Afghan girls at last? Taliban's acting deputy foreign minister calls for girls' high schools to open. And how prepared is Pakistan for the ICC Champions Trophy? A look at the preparation of venues. All this and much more on Inside South Asia. Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the US.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Welcome back. You are watching WION World is One. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Eric Njoka. Our top stories at this hour. Gaza welcomes Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli jails as part of a ceasefire deal. All 200 prisoners released after Hamas freed 4 female Israeli soldier hostages. Four Israeli women soldiers released by Hamas following more than 15 months in captivity. Parents of the hostages reunite with them. Yemen's Houthis released 153 prisoners of war, which they say belong to the government forces. This unilateral humanitarian initiative comes after years of stagnation in negotiations over prisoner exchanges between the two parties. Ukraine prepared to send coal to fuel a major power plant in Moldovan breakaway region of Transnistria. Wedged between Ukraine and Moldova, the territory is suffering from a severe heating and electricity crisis after Kyiv suspended the Moscow gas transit contract. South Korea's court denies prosecution's second request for extension of Yoon Suk-yeol's detention. This as thousands hold rival rallies in central Seoul. On the eve of India's Republic Day, government announces recipients of Padma Awards, the country's civilian honors for 2025. Jonas Masetti, Hindu spiritual leader from Brazil, and Hugh and Colleen Gantzner, renowned for writing about India's heritage, among those conferred with the Padma Shri. Mumbai police suspects more individuals may be involved in Saif Ali Khan attack case, cite the possibility in their remand application to extend accused's custody. Indian pacer Ashdeep Singh has been named the ICC Men's T20 International Cricket of the Year. The left-arm pacer played a key role in India's T20 World Cup triumph last year. And as India gears up to celebrate 76th